Right, I'm with Paddy Maguire and Jason Elliott. Welcome to Hat Mansions.
Hello, Hat.
How you doing, Nat? Are you well?
I just need to check a few things. And let's start with the very beginning, the very origin of the festival. You've had two now, and it was only barely a year and a half ago that the idea came up, as I understand it.
It's been on the cards for a while. We've talked about it many's a drunken night, I believe.
It's kind of been it's been boodling around actually, like for about 3 or 4 years, isn't it? Really, I suppose. But it wasn't until the tail end of 2010. In fact, it was the summer of 2010 because we were sat in the garden.
That's when we talked about it, and we actually started organising it.
Okay, well, let's do it.
What about is it an urban myth? It was one of those back of the fag packet moments after a few beers.
Pretty much. In that we sort of, it had been booting around as an idea, but it just got to the point where it's like, well, we don't really have any reason not to do it.
It basically started. Jason and I would sit down, we'd have a few beers, a couple of guitars would come out, and then we'd talk about who we've played with and where we've played, and we should get these people together one day to have a bit of a party. And that's how it sort of like progressed on for a couple of years. And then probably after a few more beers, I think Christmas or something or another, a couple of years back, it progressed a little bit further.
A professional musician. How come you finish up putting together a blues festival with a photographer and businessman here?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we've got a common ground, as in we do enjoy blues music, but also with blues, it's such a wide, varied genre of music, from acoustic players to the rock guys, if you like. And I believe there's been some fun and games just recently about styles of music in blues music.
Yeah, but it's a permanent argument, isn't it?
It is.
About,
So
what's genuine blues and what's not.
Yeah, but it's all music.
Exactly.
And it's so we just sat and talked, and we've got common ground, and there's a lot of music we both like at the same point.
What is that common ground? Do you have the same influences when you were growing up, Jason? What were yours?
Well, when I was growing up, mine were very eclectic and from all parts, and like I'm sure it's no particular secret that I spent quite a lot of time listening to bands like The Clash and The Ruts, which is not very bluesy, but I also listened to a lot of Zeppelin and Floyd and things like that. And I suppose in a way that was kind of because of my father. Also, and my mother had given me sort of various tapes of Brownie McGee and Sonny Terry and people busking blues in New York, and so it was. And as a musician, those are quite often the first things that you play as well. It just remains as kind of like a bedrock while you kind of go and look at these other different types of music. And I was very interested in a lot of the Atlantic and Stax record. And that kind of soul stuff as well. So it just kind of brings you around full circle when you realise that whether you're listening to a Beatles track or a Prince track, it's very, very likely to be a 12-bar blues.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, was there Pink Floyd around?
No, not far from it. No, in our household it was all rock and roll, and Conway Twitty and sort of the country music and all that sort of stuff. And I couldn't wait to get away from that. I can actually remember the first moment I ever heard a proper blues tune, and it was an instrumental, and you will know it's Green Onions. I actually watched a film called Quadrophenia about mods and rockers and Brighton and all that business. And there's a dancehall scene in that where Booker T and the MGs, I didn't know who it was at the time, and that's where it started.
Didn't Rory enter your life?
Rory on the rock side, definitely. I didn't know nothing about blues at the time. I didn't know a thing about blues other than Booker T. Rory, when I first saw Rory play, it was like the sky opened up and suddenly the sun shone through over in Ireland, and that then with the rock and listening to the Booker T melded the rock blues, which is what I do today. Really, nothing's changed in 30 years. How bad is that?
So when did you first?
Yeah.
When did you first get a band?
My first band. The first proper band I had was in England. I was in a band called Decadent West, and that was like a jazz blues fusion type thing. It's a bit far removed from what I do now, but I learned a lot about big stretchy chords. And I still think Denny Corbett, the other guitar player in the band, was the best guitar player I've ever seen.
But Jason, did you have a band? I
had a
understand
few
that
bands,
at one
yeah.
stage you used to busk on the Circle Line in London.
It was District Line, actually. That's true.
You oboe.
Yeah, no, I was a pioneer, mate. Myself and a fella called Penguin Paul, who unfortunately is no longer with us, we'd separately that year, which I think would have probably been about 1982 or 83, we'd both been busking in Europe, and I'd been in Paris on the metro, and I'd seen buskers actually playing on the trains. And at the time in London, the District Line had just been refurbished, and they brought in all these new trains with push-button doors. So myself and Penguin Paul used to go from Embankment, 3 stops to Victoria, change carriages, down to South Kent, backwards and forwards for about an hour, and we'd make about 80 quid, which in those days was, more than enough for your daily requirements, shall we say. Yeah. So, but bands-wise, it was all punk bands really for me. Doppelgang was a good one. Massive Retaliation, long before Massive Attack came out. Massive Retaliation was a great band.
Okay, let's move on to the most recent festival. You've gone from having your own bands with daft names, and this year managed to bring 37 bands. I have to say the daft names notion still exists with some of them, but you seem to have created a distinct philosophy, a distinct view about what it was you wanted to do with this festival. And it occurs to me that involves youth, up-and-coming talent, and original songwriters. Tell me about that, Paddy.
The idea of how the festival has come about is through both Jason and I, certainly with me, playing at a lot of festivals and seeing what happens there, what we like, what we don't like. So we have taken bits from other people, of course we have, but we've also developed what we've got ourselves, what's special. New and up-and-coming bands, great. Bands that are out doing the thing at the moment, out touring, out working, out pushing and promoting themselves. And also when they're doing that, they're also pushing and promoting where they're playing. And we are the first festival of the season. That's where the bands come on.
It's about kind of trying to keep it fresh, isn't it?
That's right. Got to do. Yeah.
Does that mean if serious established names came along who wanted to play here, you would think twice about it?
Well, it depends. Serious established names could mean people who had hit records a long time ago, who are still sort of doing a few gigs or whatever to pay the mortgage or as a form of living. Or you could be talking about people who are currently recording and developing their new music. In the latter case, if Joe Bonamassa wants to play, we'll think about it. Whereas some of
them that really should have hung the guitars up on her.
But yeah, there's some who really haven't had an original thought for 20, 30 years, and we probably wouldn't sacrifice putting a band on that's currently recording just to accommodate somebody like that because they've got a bigger name.
You're not going to name names, but I guess if Joe Bonamassa gave you a call, you'd certainly talk to him.
We'd think about it.
We'd talk to him, yeah.
Now, let's just stick with that notion of the festival. What is very clear...
He's a bit rocky.
We'll have to edit that piece out, I think. What is very clear is that there is a vibe generated in just 2 festivals that everybody seems to like. I mean, people have written about it, and the musicians seem to be very happy about it, and the feedback through all the Twitterati and the Facebook and websites is that somehow or other you have created in just 2 festivals an extraordinary bank of goodwill. How do you think that came about?
Well, it's if I really knew, we'd bottle it and
Bottle
sell
it,
it
yeah.
to the other festivals as well.
Yeah.
No, but seriously,
It was that easy.
I think it's just because obviously both of us having, as gigging musicians or whatever, I'm not anymore, but like we can see things very much from a musician's perspective, and that's how we've kind of tried to set everything up. And of course, there's still things that we could do better, but because we try and look at everything from, first and foremost, from the musician's perspective, because if the musician's happy, then they're going to perform well, and the audience, the people who come to see them, will be happy. And by starting at that premise, rather than, how we're going to make loads of money, because we don't, then, I think that's probably the way it's built.
Mm. Well, it's the same, if you get the musicians happy, if you can get the people, the fans happy. We don't offer massive green facilities to the musicians. I know as a musician, if somebody gives me a little free beer, I'm going to disappear with a free beer. It's great where you can see, somebody that's touring the country stood buying a pint with somebody, somebody who's bought their CD and talking about the recording.
Yeah.
And they also, we get the press involved, and you'll see the artists, speaking to the press, whether it be radio or printed press. So it all happens.
It's very intimate.
It's very much so, yeah, and it's great. I think it's fantastic how things are built around that.
Why is it that Hebden Bridge Blues Festival seems to have got that reputation and some other festivals don't have it? What is it that you do in particular?
I think that's a question for the other festivals, really.
Yeah.
We just try and do the best that we can from our own perspective. We don't, sure we're aware of what other festivals do and everything, but those are their issues, and we have ours.
Now, you're both fairly high profile when the festival is taking place. From a spectator's point of view, that would seem to be quite important, that they know you're there.
Yeah, it's just like friends, Pete.
Yeah.
It's just like friends. We all get together. We know just about everybody that comes. We know the artists. You'll see outside many of the venues that, either Jason will be there, I'll be there, one of the artists will be there, talking to somebody who's bought a ticket for the weekend.
Just try and keep it intimate.
Yeah.
Really.
Yes, now that leads me to the Paddy Maguire Midnight Jam, which is the personification of madness and fun. And how did that come about?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier on, it's one festival I played just recently at 11 o'clock, everything stopped. And you've got a town full of musicians that are just wanting to get going. And we're all friends, we all like to play together, and have a bit of fun. And one of the things that we do excel at, no matter who the musician is and what they play, is when we get together we can have a jam session. That's one of the most important things for me at the festival. Plus we all get a chance to mix it up a little bit.
And that's the beauty of it being blues as well.
That's right.
It's very conspicuous from those sessions that the musicians enjoy it.
Oh, it's
And
phenomenal.
you do get, I think somebody said, you can touch the hem of your idol on the same stage.
Yeah.
That's a significant thing.
Well, it's very much so. If you can get somebody that plays in a band on a Friday and a Saturday only, and he's a bricklayer come Monday to Friday, stood up on stage playing with his idol, I don't mean that in a bad sense, obviously. It's a dream for everybody,
And all of this, every time there's one of these sessions, everybody who's looking at it knows that they're there for a bit of history, because this won't ever happen again. This particular combination, playing these particular songs, won't ever happen again.
Now, Jason, tell me about how this is run. I mean, how much does money, or in the case of the Blues Festival, as I understand it, the lack of it, affect the decisions that you're making and taking?
Well, it has to affect it to a degree, in terms of the decisions that we make regarding venues and things like that. But what it doesn't really affect is, obviously we don't have an unlimited pot of money, but it doesn't affect our choice of bands, or because as far as we're concerned, going back to the whole philosophical approach of only selecting those musicians that have really got their heart into it at the moment and are writing new material and are trying to push the stuff forward. You know, that's what we want, and we're going to do that regardless. And hopefully that will then mean that the money then follows, but that's not, you know, that's not really the motivation or too much of a factor. We're limited in terms of the available space in Hebden Bridge as well, so we can't go and hire the Albert Hall because we haven't got one.
Yeah.
But it's not a business that anybody can make money in, is it really?
No. It's very hard. I mean, the music business is very hard, and then the festival thing. You know, Jason said the financial side does limit that. It limits us to some of the things we'd like to do. But yeah, again, we've got something special in Hebden, so why should we hire the Albert Hall if it was in the middle of Hebden? We shouldn't.
That's right. Well, that intimacy that we've got at the moment, which is basically the whole, the best bit about the festival in many ways, would be lost if we went bigger. And in actual fact, for next year, that very big venue that we'd used in the Picture House is going to be dropped, and we're going to go for something a little bit smaller. It'll still be a decent sized venue, but not so big.
Yeah, heard it here first, folks.
There you go.
Going back to this year's festival and the great vibe it had, one of the notable things to come out of it was this extraordinary list of blues nominations, British blues nominations of the year. Now, how did that come about?
We knew who was being nominated. No, not at all.
You're claiming this as a magical insight.
No, not at all. The only insight is that we've got our ears to the ground. We know what's going on. We know who's playing. You know, we turn up at gigs unannounced, just walk in, see what they're playing like. You know, we've got all the social feeds. We see what's happening. We see who's out there. Yeah, and it's just using our ears. That's all it is. We use our ears. You know, they tell us what's happening.
There were some genuine surprises at the festival this year. People who just almost came out of nowhere and just took the whole place by storm. And some of those, of course, have got Blues Award nominations. I mean, do you see any particular reason for this, Jason? Is it just good insight, as you were saying?
Well, I think basically, Paddy's being a bit modest here, really. With the exception of like 3 or 4 other bands, which are my recommendations, everything else Paddy chooses in the same way that for an exhibition you have a single curator who kind of works out, you know, which bands are most suitable for this venue, who works well with that. It's a bit like choosing which paintings to have on that wall or whatever, or that. And basically, he's done an incredible job by selecting these bands long before they're nominated for anything, and it just, all it is, I think, is just a reflection of his good taste in music.
Do you think this is something that you're going to carry on? Do you
Absolutely.
suspect that the festival will become the place to go to if you're thinking of...
Well, I mean, after the
racing
nomination happened, we've had telephone calls from artists that I don't think are particularly relevant nowadays. They'll know who they are when they see this. I'm not here to sort of shake any ways at anybody. We want artists that are out and playing that are relevant now. You know, no matter who they are and what style, we can fit them in somehow. And it's just something that I love music. You know, I'm a blues music fan before a player, and I like to go and see what's what. It doesn't have to be a noisy rock guitar player style thing. That's my domain, essentially. But it can be, and there's millions of them. Believe me, there's millions of those guys. But there's all sorts of music that's in the blues realm. Some of the bands we had up this time, could you call them blues? Yes, you certainly could, but they had a different approach to it. You know.
But we did that a bit last year with bands like 24 Pesos, who you know, probably sound more like Red Hot Chili Peppers than they do like Muddy Waters.
Yeah.
But they're certainly blues bands. And
Is there a place for the traditional acoustic blues man?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
if I turned up as a Afro-American 70-year-old acoustic blues man,
There's room for it there.
That's a trick. It's a kind of tricky
Yeah.
kind of question, because if you were a 70-year-old musician, really, unless you were still doing new stuff, then probably like you'd be very, very welcome to come to the jam, but not necessarily.
Yeah, you know, I mean,
Because it kind of goes against
Name-
on a certain level what it is. that
naming
you're
names at
trying
the moment. Buddy Guy's just come out with a new album.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
Buddy Guy wants to
Yeah.
come along, he's a new album, new material.
to- Yeah,
He's still leading the front.
Yeah.
So Buddy would be more than welcome if he'd like to come.
But there are others.
but if
There's a lot of
if Bo Diddley and John Lee Hooker were around, they'd have trouble getting on the bill.
Well, I don't think John Lee Hooker would have, because he was still recording new stuff up
Yeah.
until we lost him. But possibly Bo Diddley might have trouble getting on the bill.
Okay, let's talk about next year. And there's a widely held assumption that you're going to have another festival next year.
That would be correct.
Absolutely.
You heard it here
Indeed,
first.
you put the dates up. I imagine that you're already being inundated
Absolutely.
with requests here.
Yeah, lots of
And
CDs have come in.
You've made it very clear in other places that you have a time schedule here. Going back briefly to the success of this year, would you see any of the people who were hits this year coming back next year, perhaps?
Well, there's a couple who definitely will be.
Do you want to name names?
Yeah, we're quite happy to name names on these two, and that is that the one of my personal favourites, and I think one of the successes of this year was a band called Rabbitfoot, and they are coming back, and
Yeah.
we arranged that at the time. The other one would be the Binsness Blues Boys, who, in fairness, we had them on at the Picture House, but it wasn't really it wasn't the opportunity to get the best out of them. So this year we are having them doing some other stuff, which we're not going to talk about now, but those two are definitely back.
Did you have any favourites, Paddy, from last year you'd like to see back?
I'd like to have everybody from year one and everybody from year two back in one big festival, plus a few others. They're all my favourites for all different reasons. There's not one particular favourite artist that I've got. For me, it's more memorable moments. You know, playing with people that I idolise, and I idolise everybody. You know, if they can play an instrument, no matter what it is, they're heroes.
There are clearly some favourites with the fans, the
Yeah.
spectators who come. And you're talking about having year one and year two. Well, a couple of people have played year one and year two, notably Paddy Milner and Marcus Bonfanti. Are you able to tell me whether they may be coming back?
Yeah, they will be coming back.
They're coming back.
We want to. The thing is, Marcus and Paddy, particularly Marcus, they've been pretty much involved since the inception of the idea, and you know, they're such incredibly talented performers, as well as being technically good musicians. The actual performance they give is you know, it is tremendous. It's an absolutely
Their
jaw-dropping
performance,
spectacle.
it is Hebden Bridge, I think.
It is, and that's how we want to close
That's right.
every festival.
Right, now you're not going to be able to tell me this, obviously, because of the secrecy that inevitably surrounds festival lineups. But do you have people at the back of your mind for next year?
I've got people at the front of my mind. I've spoken to quite a few of them already, and yes, I've preliminary booked quite a few artists already. The ones that we've had that many applications over the years, and unfortunately the hardest part of organising any festival is unfortunately the bands that can play.
Yeah, same.
So we're moving bands up all the time. So yeah, there are some bands been confirmed already.
What about the top of the bill? Do you
Uh-huh.
have plans for that?
Yes, we do. We're looking at. There's about three. Obviously, because we've got 3 days, so there's 3 different kind of headliners there. We are examining at the moment the possibility of having a well-known American artist topping one of the days, possibly 2 American artists. It's not necessarily going to be that way because there's some really good English or British contenders for that spot as well. But we're certainly looking at it from a more international perspective this time.
But you're not going to tell the hat?
Unfortunately, dear Hat, not right now.
Not at this moment in time.
Okay, now next year's festival, are you going to change anything? You've already mentioned that you're probably not going to have the main stage at the Picture House.
Yeah. As far as sort of kind of operational changes goes, that's the biggest one. We've looked at a variety of different things, including taking the festival outdoors, which is obviously not going to happen now. As Hebden Bridge has had these couple of floods, the weather's been rubbish. We've had a few wet summers, so certain things are going to be the same, which is it's going to be an all indoor event. It's going to be based primarily in and around the centre of Hebden Bridge, with hopefully all the different venues within staggering distance. What we may do is reduce some of the juke joints and have more acts over more days in a smaller number, so that there's so that it's more concentrated, and we can keep that intimacy, because that's the key, as we touched on earlier on there. And you know, Paddy and myself and all the artists have worked really hard to keep that kind of close contact between the audience and the stage, and so from that perspective it's never really going to get much bigger.
You had 30 to 40 bands last year, Paddy. Are you going to have around the same numbers this year?
Around the same numbers. We don't want too many more. We don't want to turn it into the Uber festival. We'd like to give every artist the opportunity to show what they've got. If you limit them down to half an hour or 45 minutes, like some venues do, then you know a band really can't get into its stride.
Yeah.
You know,
just getting warmed up and
just getting going and then they're off again. You know, so no, that's about the right figure. Around that 40 mark for over a 3-day event.
Well, guys, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I know, but we haven't mentioned it, that you've been nominated.
Yes, we have, yeah.
For British Blues Award as the best UK festival,
which
I
is
have
very
to
nice.
say is pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing,
yeah.
I think anybody watching this will see why and where the dynamic comes from, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.